Congratulations on We Are Faheem and Karun. I watched it, and can I be very honest with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I read the synopsis before even watching the film, my initial thought was, how is this going to be any different from a queer love story that's exploring its sexuality as well as the political conflict? That was my initial thought, and I was very pleasantly surprised because it doesn't follow, the regular cliche tropes of a queer romance story in like a conservative society, right? It does push beyond that, and that's something that I was very excited to see. It was very refreshing. And finally, when I decided that yes, we're going to have this conversation, I was like, I have to ask you about your creative process in this to balance the nuanced storytelling as well as possibly trying to make sure that you are addressing a larger issue.
One is for me, it's very, very obviously it's that I did not want to make the conflict invisible. It is, I feel that if you're in Kashmir, it's a part of your life. How you look at conflict is, of course, there are different ways of looking at. My focus, of course, the reason was it's based on real stories and incidents. That's why I chose Kashmir, not just... And I think for me it was very important that what am I seeking out of the film? One is being queer, you're anyway othered, be it in a conservative Muslim society or in the forces, and how when people are other, they can seek for places, they overcome the usual boundaries that is created by a heteronormative, patriarchal, male-driven society. You overcome that to reach out to each other. While exploring these stories, one is also, it's not about conflict, it's just not about Kashmir. If you literally look around the world, everywhere what you see right now is so much of conflict and hate and the narrative of hate. And what I wanted to do with this film is maybe dismantle in a tiny way the image of the enemy, because we're constantly building enemies, and that the hate narrative. And I feel that somewhere, where do we stop othering each other, and finding reasons to say that, you don't belong, and instead of that, for me, was to look for that sense of belonging, to find ways to challenge the idea of the enemy, Two, I felt that, again, setting a queer story in Kashmir with a conservative, now if I look at Fahim's character, it would have been very easy to have a very aggressive brother, mother being thrown out, beaten, all those things, And I thought that one is my experience as an out and proud queer filmmaker going for 18 years to Kashmir is not that. I've been loved, I've been accepted, and why will I, not take that aspect if I feel that we are always seeing what is not nice? Maybe it's time to nurture what is beautiful, what is also there. And, I feel our stories, our narrative, the news, everything is always talking mostly of what is wrong.
Because that's what sells in the news. Negative news spreads
and
faster.
I feel that, no, let me
change.
I want to, do that. And it's not just about Karun. If you look at, again, Fahim, also about Karun in the setup. It's very easy to be humiliated, to be outed, to be exploited because of your sexuality, but Karun's colleagues don't do that.
You mentioned Kashmir, and I didn't know that you have actually spent a lot of time in Kashmir, and one of my questions was, why Kashmir? I guess I will change the question a little bit.
No, I think I still can, answer. One is, I've been going there for 18 years, so it's not that, and I feel that, like, going there, having met, apart from this being inspired by real stories, I've met a lot of Kashmiri queer people who don't have a voice, who don't have visibility, and I felt that it's important to at least start the conversation. It won't be immediately accepted, appreciated, but I have lived most of my life being criminalized by law, and we all spoke up, and today we have what we have because of that. And I feel that it's unfortunately not started in most of the Islamic spaces of countries, or and I felt that if there is any which way I can start that conversation, even if it's a small one, it's important to start the conversation if we have to in future look for a space that is safe for the community.
But do you think Faheem and Karun's story would unfold differently if the cultural context or the geographical context was different?
See, any love story
Mhm.
is subject to where you set it,
True.
subject to gender,
Mm.
right? So it would obviously have its own shades of whatever might the conflict be if it was in a different space. And that is why Fahim and Karun had to be in Kashmir, because it was not a Bollywood song that I'm setting in Kashmir. It was organic. Whatever happens in the film, the story is organic to the space, to the people, and not artificially put there. And that's the difference between, you have films which are just set in Kashmir, you know, and this is not that.
I really appreciated the fact that all the characters are so soft. They're making a point in every conversation, but they're soft, the relationships are soft, the location is gorgeous, but there's some softness to it. I really, really enjoyed watching that as well, which is not typical of what we see when we have Kashmir as a backdrop, and a love story in Kashmir as a backdrop.
Yeah, I feel that Kashmir, like, I was actually quite touched when my actor, when he was asked why you did the film, he said that I'm not playing a terrorist.
There you go.
You know, so
Wow.
because mostly as a Kashmiri you are cast as a terrorist or as an army, you know, there are nothing beyond
Nothing
that.
beyond that, yeah.
You know, and also if you are Muslim, you're all the time doing Allahu Akbar, and you know how it is.
Yeah.
And actually, it's my first film where I have shown my characters, because I'm an atheist. But in this film, it was important for me to show both the characters as religious,
They were both praying, yeah.
and that Fahim can be a practicing Muslim and queer. And there is a conflict there. Right from when his brother says, go away, that's also out of concern. And he is someone who says, but this is my home. So similarly, it's his religion that he wants to practice. And similarly, Karun, he's worshipping this deity called Lord Ayyappa, who is, in a way, it's also interesting. Lord Ayyappa is worshipped in south of India, and he is supposed to have been born out of the union of Vishnu and Shiva. So in a way, a queer, a god.
Yeah.
And of course, one can't talk about these things easily, but that is the background, and I wanted to bring that in.
Wow, I was not aware of that. Speaking of another, I guess, well thought out element, and tell me I'm not overthinking this, but was apple sort of like a symbol of the forbidden fruit?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
please tell me more about that.
So for me, it was also, again, when we were working on the script my co-writer is Fawzia Mirza, and we were discussing how to use food and all this as an element of the narrative, you know, because they're going to give each other the food, and they're constantly chai, and you know, there is a certain sensuality. And to start with the apple, of course, not only because of its connotation, but it is Fahim who reaches out. So again, changing the usual power structure, you know, where you would expect the Kashmiri boy to be more docile, and this guy to be making the first move, because he is in a more space. But I wanted to change it where Fahim is more confident, and he's, you know, and that is not just about what the apple signifies. You also make out that when Fahim is doing that entire conversation, he's actually makes it very obvious that he's checking this guy out. You know, and I wanted that confidence to be there in Fahim, and Karun is the one, though he's in the security, he's like the shy one who's almost blushing, looking around. But there's a happiness when he finally bites in, and you see even his colleagues just acknowledge, you know, not make big deal out of it.
But they're like,
But you know, kind of.
Yeah.
So for me, we wanted to, like, both me and Fawzia, we wanted to play with the whole thing, and that's why you constantly see him giving him the apple, you know.
I thought that was so sweet. And also, again, I'm going back to what I said earlier already, which was how everyone around is, again, outside of that box that we typically see. Even Karun's colleagues, they're not questioning him, they're not bullying him, which could typically be expected as well. That was, again, I know I'm repeating myself, very refreshing, because my mind straight went to, oh, he's going to get bullied now, but it didn't happen.
So there were, you know, when we were developing the script, there was one point where we had the bullying element. Again, as discussing, I was like, no, let's change the narrative, out here, because again, these are things one has always, and I know of people who are in that space who are been working for 20 years, 10 years, and they find people with empathy, and that's why they can survive despite being invisible, because there are others who accept and understand, And similarly, even with Faheem's, one could easily make it that Zaid becomes the stone thrower, for example,
Yes,
the elder brother. So we were like, no, he's not going to be there stone throwing.
It's the friend.
Yeah. Not give any face to quote unquote the terrorists. They're in the distance and he's in the edge because it's there, not, again, all those discussions, Faheem could die, Karun could die, any of it could happen, but one does not, he could have been the one who is caught there, right? And in a way it becomes a more emotional but I was like, no, I don't want to use any of these things, because in conflict spaces you always end up that one of them is blown to pieces or killed, or so
that's always the end of the story. I think I read somewhere, and I think you mentioned it just now as well, that the story was actually inspired by
real
a true gentleman.
True gentleman who happens to be in the army.
Okay.
But unfortunately, when I wrote the script initially, the Ministry of Defense banned the script.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't know actually that the army does not accept, despite the Supreme Court verdict, queer individuals, and it was kind of sad because the army man who's with whom the conversation started, he came live with me. He was very brave, and I thank him for that, on NDTV everywhere, saying that but I exist. But that didn't change because it was just banned. There was no conversation with me, and then I hear 3 months later that it's being discussed in the parliament. It was told that the film is derogatory towards the army and it's a threat to the national security. I was like, oh my god, I have to make this film. So that's when I did what I learned from Iranian cinema, is I made him into a security guard. Okay, so all that changes is the costume, but the story remains, and what I want to tell remains.
And then the government was okay with it?
No, I don't know. I have to still send it for...
Okay. How do you foresee the film looking in the mainstream? Because there are multiple layers of censorship, right? There's politics, there's religion, there's queer love story. How do you see it taking shape in mainstream?
I don't know actually, because the censor board always comes with a surprise of what they have problems with. My last film is a film called Pinecone, with which I had come to BFI, and recently went for film certification. And I was expecting problems with the sex scenes, because it's a film that celebrates queer desire. But they say that, Supreme Court ne to bol diya, it's okay, so we can't cut those scenes. So that shows the importance of a verdict. He says, but I had a dialogue where the niece, a 9-year-old, 8-year-old girl, calls up the mama and says, Mama, mummy ne mujhe bataya hai ki aap gay ho, and I love you. And for me, it's what my niece told me, And the censor board said, "Bachche ko kyun ye gay word?" So I fought a lot, but then I realized that, I would get into a loop with more things. But to think that you still have a censor board today who thinks that children should not know the word gay is so dangerous, because there is so much of bullying, instead of saying that everyone should be empowered. And I feel when I took the same film to Bhutan, the Ministry of Education sent a circular to different schools saying students above class 10 should come and watch the film.
Oh, wow.
Because it's important that we are more inclusive as a society.
I think beyond empowerment, it's also about education, because a lot of your mindset changes when you are aware, when you're educated about stuff like that. Yeah. When you write a project, do you ever think about how will it be received?
It's not the primary force, then I think I won't end up making half the stuff I do. I feel for me the driving force is the need to tell a story. Otherwise, with all this, for example, when this ministry banned the film, all the studios, everyone backed out of the film. And then it was accidental that my accountant came and told me that, listen, your life insurance is matured, and what do you want to do? Invest? I said, no, let's use it. So I used all my personal savings for this film. It didn't take me a lot of thinking. My family was very upset that, all your savings. And I'm like, but this is what gives me most happiness, to be able to tell our stories. So if that was the thought process, I don't think I would end up making a lot of things that I do. And it's a choice, because I could have, after my first film, because it made a mark. By the way, today is 20 years
happy
of
birthday.
my birthday. Thank you. And I could have chosen to go into that more mainstream space, but I chose this thing because this is what gives me happiness. So I think, of course, as a filmmaker, the more people who watch your film, but then you realize that if I'm telling stories which people are not, unfortunately the straight world is still learning to accept us. So if I don't tell our stories, they'll still be sitting and not accepting us.
Fair enough.
So I'm like, I need, for the next generation of queer people should not face what I did.
We're going to shift gears a little bit, and I wanted to talk about coming back to basically tropes and the usage of tropes, not in films, but I guess in the industry at large. This is something that I've noticed, a lot of my peers have noticed, a lot of, I guess, people in the film industry have noticed as well, that a lot of films that come from the subcontinent region and then get a lot of international recognition at global film festivals, they typically come with the same sort of themes, and they focus on, let's say, marginalized communities, poverty, or struggles of society. A, I want to get your thoughts on that, and B is, do you think this trend actually reflects the genuine need to highlight these issues? Or is it just like a film festival formula?
Complex question, because I feel that there are some films which the language of cinema that they adapt is quote-unquote world cinema, which does not recognize the language of Indian cinema. And for me it's very important that the films that I make are very Indian. I like to, because I feel that the West never looks at us, which is the world's largest filmmaking, to see how they should adapt. Why are we constantly pushed into that space? I think it's really nice that some people are telling stories of marginalized people, because the mainstream media, be it minority communities, religion, caste, gender, anything that's not majoritarian is forgotten and not spoken. So I feel those stories, it's important, but what's also important is what's the gauge. And unfortunately at times the gauge is very Western. I don't have a problem with Satya three films were showing about poverty, Ritika, but they are beautiful films, and it's not about poverty. Ultimately, it's much more beyond that. So there are, of course, films that which don't follow that pattern, but I feel that very often mainstream also attacks because of their lack of ability to have any empathy beyond box office, and the need to, and also a lot of people now use the mainstream to tell stories of hate, and that's becoming very worrisome.
It's becoming very obvious as well.
Yeah. So in that kind of space, I rather nurture. None of us are perfect. Stories that are at least talking about marginalized. And today, if they don't find, suppose even though my film is very Indian, if I don't find an audience outside, unfortunately, we are still very colonial mentality. It'll be even more harder to find at home. So sometimes you need the festivals space to get a little validation, so that people open up to even listening to you. But at the same time, it's true that increasingly there are films which has been to Berlin, which has been to Busan. They don't get distribution in India, because it's not perceived as populist, which is very, very, very sad, because I feel that as an industry we need to balance between, accept that yes, there is a commercial cinema, but cinema that is quote-unquote art or non-mainstream or indies as precious. And if you can lose 150 crores in making a terrible mainstream film, how much can you lose in a 5 crore indie film, which is good, right? So it is about your ability as you're supposed to be marketing. As a filmmaker, my job is to make a film. And if you can't market if I'm giving you a good film, the problem is you.
Mhm.
Because with a big bad film, you're willing to lose
A lot of
10
money.
times more the money,
Mhm.
but you're not willing to put in the effort to market a small budget independent film which tells a beautiful story.
That's really well put. I'll come back to Faheem and Karun. What is next for Faheem and Karun?
So this is, if you notice, it says chapter 1.
Mhm.
So this is actually a sequel. We Are is a sequel to I Am,
Mhm.
my film which had 4 stories as an anthology.
Mm.
But I decided when the ban happened, instead of making it an anthology, because with my savings I could, it's more
Yeah.
difficult, I decided to make 4 films which are connected
Okay.
but independent.
Okay.
So first one is We Are Faheem and Karun, and after this is a film called We Are Mumtaz and Anand. So there will be characters like in the first one, the security guards are looking at this mobile phone where there's a drag
Sushant.
queen.
Ah,
So she's Mumtaz.
I was wondering why is there only one scene, and I was like, there needs to be more of
Yeah.
Sushant.
So in the next film, she becomes the
Ah.
lead protagonist. So so I hope that I can recover my investments in this to be able to start that.
Amazing. And without giving away too much of how the film ends, though, for you, where do you think Faheem and Karun are in the world today?
They are sad because their love is immense,
Mm.
and not to be able to realize that. And I feel they will reach out to each other.
I feel that too. I think they're
And that's
together.
why if you see, without giving out the end, the mother's gesture is ultimately of acceptance. And I think that was very important for me, that you have the signs of Karun in the last frame with Faheem.
And okay, I won't give away too much. I was just going to say, but I'll tell you offline. I don't want to give away too much. Okay, lastly, what next for Onir besides the anthology that you've just mentioned?
I'm working on actually multiple stories,
Mhm.
because you don't know when you can get finance for what you want to do, and there are various stories that keep coming to you. For the first time, I don't know, suddenly I find myself doing more and more queer stories. Earlier, most of my work has been not, but now I feel the more the resistance happens, the more I'm like, no, I have to do it, I don't care. And I feel very overwhelmed the other day at the screening at BFI. There was this young group of boys who came up, and he says that you're one of the few who keeps telling our stories, and we are visible as South Asians, and thank you, it means a lot. And for me that means a lot. It just makes all the hurdles worth it.
Worth it.
That somewhere there's validation and it stays. There is one film that I really want to make, finding it difficult to get finance, is a biopic of, I don't know if you've heard of Riyadh Wadia.
No.
He's from the Wadia family.
Okay.
And Riyadh was one of the first, really outrageously flamboyant gay filmmaker who made Bomb Gaze, which is a short gay film. But he was, I think, 29 or 30. He died of AIDS. But he was like Freddie Mercury. Beautiful, flamboyant, outrageous. And I felt that his story should be told because he was such an incredible person. Let's see, I want to do
Inshallah.
that.
It'll
Yeah.
happen soon and we'll get to see it.